This video is made possible by the EA Creator Network and was captured on a work-in-progress build. What's going on, everybody? My name is C4. Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys the exact settings I use every single time I start a franchise rebuild in Madden 26 at launch. At launch is the keyword here, because as the life cycle of the game carries on, these sliders are going to change, and I am very much going to de facto to some of the top slider creators in this Madden community. There's some outstanding ones over on operationsports.com. My personal preference have been Mat 10 sliders, but at launch, there's just been no time for anyone to come up with a solid set of sliders, and because I've had access to Madden 26 for about a week now, and I've gone through a couple different franchise modes, I feel like I've got the sliders, at least for me personally, on all Madden to a spot that I feel pretty good about it going into week 1 and launch of this game. Now, the first part of starting your franchise mode is you have to decide whether or not you want an offline franchise mode or an online franchise mode. It's always an interesting discussion to have, and I can't speak to your personal situation, whether or not which, offline is better for you or online is better for you. I can only share what I do when I am doing a rebuild, and I know it's not going to be like my long-term franchise. It's something where I'm going to be playing with that team for 3 days, 4 days, maybe even a week. I'm going to do usually an online franchise mode just because you get the faster simulation times, everything automatically saves as you carry on. It's just the intended Madden franchise experience. It feels like that's at least where they're kind of shifting towards, and a lot of times when there's updates and stuff like that, they will be applied to an online franchise mode sooner before they're patched in to an offline franchise mode save. However, when I do like my main channel franchise modes this year, stay tuned, it's going to be the Vegas Raiders. I can't wait. I think for like something that I could be using for an undetermined amount of time, I always just kind of like the security of always having access to it. I can utilize it even on days that there might be title updates or server maintenance. I always have access to my franchise file, and for like the main 2, 3, 4 life cycle of the game type franchises, I like to defer to an offline file. Now, for the roster file you want to use, unless you're like downloading something off of like the community share that you want to start with, maybe a retro roster or whatever, I almost always try and use the most up-to-date weekly NFL roster update as my roster starting point. Now, before we get into the settings, the last thing you need to do before setting your franchise mode is you have to decide your coach type. You have one of 3 types, or you can go and play as a real-life coach that will fall under one of these 3 types: offensive guru, defensive genius, and development wizard. I have videos breaking down each one of these coach builds, the pros and cons, as well as the meta endgame build of abilities that you want to unlock. Go check that out. Now, the last thing that relates to just how I rebuild and key factors and key things you got to pay attention to for a rebuild, with the new coach abilities, there are abilities in particular that I think, be it your head coach, be it your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator, even your trainer, there are key upgrades and abilities that you need to prioritize. You need to pay attention for when you unlock them to make sure that you go upgrade them and you have them equipped in your weekly training as an active ability. Now, I'm starting as Dick Sirianni, but one of the big ones, if you're playing with a offensive guru, you will have it under your player development eventually. If you are playing as a defensive genius or a talent developer, you're going to have to look at the offensive coordinator for this ability, and it is after school tutor. You are going to want that because that is going to unlock the 3 additional focus players that you're going to have every single week earning extra XP during your weekly training. And then when you unlock all the way to tier 4, it gives you that 10% increase of training XP for all players. Super, super valuable for a rebuild. I also think at level 27, Camp Counselor is so clutch to have equipped right at the beginning of a season before training camp. These are going to give you boosts throughout training camp. The tier 1 is going to give you an additional 100 rookie snaps for gold medals in training camp. That cuts towards rookies with hidden dev traits and how quickly you can unveil those dev traits. And then at tier number 4 in this one, you get that 5% boost to dev trait upgrade odds in training camp. So that's when you hit a gold medal with a star dev, it's going to give you an increased chance to get that superstar, or for the superstar to get that superstar X factor. So here's where, for an example, when you level up the extra focus trainer spots, you start with 3 by default. Having 6 would be so huge for training and practice throughout the season. And the last ability that you need to have is, here is a look at your scouting staff. These are the scouts that are going to give you your information on the draft class throughout the regular season. And for the last couple of years since they've implemented this feature, you've been able to have 1 3-star scout that you set as your national scout And those are the best. They give you the most information. They give you the best shot at unveiling a player 100%. You get their true talent grade as well as the ratings. You're allowed one tier 2 scout, which is obviously it's just a progressive system. So he's a little bit better, but you still get good information. And then you would have 3 tier 1 scouts, and that was the formula you had to follow. So either you as a head coach, if you were a talent developer background, I think you get him at level 33. But in this scenario where we're Sirianni, who's an offensive genius, our offensive coordinator at level 45 would unlock the ability Scout's Honor, which will give you up to, if you work your way all the way down, 5 tier 3 scouts. So that is going to give you, from a scouting department standpoint, the most information possible on that draft class, and it is so valuable. Now for our base settings, we're going to be showing what I've used on all Madden. We go simulation game style. I go 12-minute quarters. I have accelerated clock on with a minimum play clock time of 20 seconds. We have a 3 play call cooldown, so you can't call the same play until you run 3 plays in between. I have a play call limit offensively of 5, so that I can't just run slants and toss plays over and over again. Sometimes it's hard to have that self-restraint, and I feel like limiting yourself to 5 in case you're not checking yourself. However, on the defensive side of the ball, I kind of go free reign and have both the cooldown and limit set to off, as well as home field advantage on. Gotta experience it. Gotta experience the full Madden 26 experience, especially on the road. Now for team settings, I have everything set to manual outside of managed practice reps. I feel like the game just did a better job of that than I did. I turn off the auto progress players. You can turn it on, especially if you're trying to maybe speed run a season or two, but I think for me, I like to control how my players develop, specifically if I want to make them a scheme fit perfectly with their archetype or not. Like if I have a player that's an 85 overall, but they're an 82 scheme fit, sometimes I'll put my points into that 82 scheme fit to raise them out, and if you have it set to auto, that will not happen. I also like having the ability weekly recap turned on. So as you can see at the top of the screen there, Nick Sirianni for my coach information. He's level 20. So when I would hit level 21, because I have the ability weekly recap turned on, after that game, it's going to pop up and showcase, you've reached level 21. Here is the new unlocks. Here is your progress on your abilities and earning ability XP. I think it's very valuable information that I want to get on a week-to-week basis. Turn off tutorials. That's why you're watching this video. For commissioner settings, the only thing I really like to tweak with too much here is the trade difficulty. The number one thing, even if you don't want to admit it, the number one thing as far as showing self-restraint is not so much when you're trading for a player, because sometimes you just can't make it happen. You might not have the right type of, they need a tackle and you don't have any tackles worth trading. It's not that big of a deal. But there is barely any time that I've ever shown self-restraint when I'm trying to trade up in the draft. If there's a team at pick 10 and I'm at pick 15 and I want to trade up, and maybe it's unrealistic. Maybe I know it's unrealistic, but I know they'll accept it. I'll do that 9 times out of 10. And I found bumping the trade difficulty up to hard kind of keeps you in check a little bit. It gives you that self-restraint that you may not be always able to show, especially when you just zero in, you need to move up to pick 10 to get a player that you fell in love with during the draft process. This kind of does its best job to still make it possible to make those trades. And not make it unreasonable, but just a little more difficult to get those trades to accept. I think you should go with wear and tear on. Get the brand new feature that's coming to Madden 26 franchise mode. Enjoy it. Because there's some things that I've never loved having pre-existing injury on, but sometimes you need to have it on. I never loved having progressive fatigue on. So if you were starting a weekly start today, you have to have these options on automatically. But for progressive fatigue, I never liked it. I never liked managing my players' stamina and stuff like that. So I almost automatically turned that off. And it was never a mechanism that I fell in love with. But with the wear and tear, there is so much when you look at your coaching staff. You now have a trainer. And within that trainer, a lot of his most valuable abilities are going to be tied to wear and tear, to practice injuries, to the base injury. So I feel like now that they've shown and given some TLC to the management of player health, I think you got to turn these on and get the full Madden 26 experience by having to deal with your player health, by having to deal with player wear and tear and the big time ratings nerfs that you're going to get, -5 speed if a player, you're running him into the absolute ground. And it makes it that much more valuable to upgrade your trainer with these options on. I do, however, down here in free agents, the default I think is 5 and 10, the amount of negotiations you can have on stage 1 and stage 2. In my opinion, leave that as is if you're in a multi-user league, so it prevents someone from just going insane during the first stage and just offering absolutely everybody. But I think when you're going up against computers, is that something that even happens in real life? Like, there's no way that teams are like, I'm only going to have 5 negotiations during the first week of free agency. Like, that's not going to happen. You're just going up against other CPUs. So I think unlimited is the way to go. The last thing in settings is the dev trait management, where you definitely want breakout scenarios on. You definitely want dev trait regression on, something I never thought I would say. I used to automatically turn this off and would passionately defend my reason about why I've turned it off. But it does feel like for every, and hopefully, and I haven't experienced yet, I've done 4 franchise modes now, and I haven't had one, and it's early. This is an early build. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm not saying that maybe I've just got incredibly lucky, but we all know if you've played any amount of franchise mode, there will be times that your players lose dev traits, and it's incredibly harsh, borderline, doesn't make sense. And if you hate that, and I get you hate it, I hate it when it happens as much as you guys, you absolutely guilt-free can turn that off. But in my opinion, I think, and especially from my experience anyway in Madden 26, it's worked better. I believe in the franchise deep dive, they talked about, the regression sliders, the retirement sliders, and how like they've kind of changed how the game behaves in those regards. So maybe there's something about the dev trait regression not being as punishing. That was a fix in Madden 26 franchise mode. Last year, by default, these sliders weren't maxed, but when you start up a franchise mode in Madden 26, they are maxed. So if that's how they want it to be, and maybe is that how they tuned under the hood dev trait regression by having 75 X factors, 100 superstars, and 500 stars, then I think we should leave it as is. There's going to be a nothing burger, XP sliders. I can only comment from my experience looking around at XP sliders in Madden 25. It seems like these are tuned to a relatively good spot. Now, there's always probably some fine-tune min-maxing. I looked around at probably 5 different XP slider sets all around the internet, every corner, YouTube, Operation Sports, on Reddit, and like for the most part, XP sliders, when there was changes, instead of this being 100, it'd be 90 or it'd be 85. There was nothing that was broken. There was nothing that was like maxed to 300 because the XP wasn't working. Everything was pretty close to default, so in my opinion, I would not touch these and leave them as such. I'm going to kind of hit the draft class strength sliders with the same approach of just leaving it on default for the time being. I know Mr. Hurricane, shout out, he's the GOAT, the franchise GOAT, came up with a real nice set of sliders on these, and he does good testing on these. But we know from the Madden 26 franchise deep dive that the custom draft class, like when you're not taking something off the roster here, when you're using something that is generated within your Madden franchise file, they said during the deep dive that they've kind of changed that a little bit with archetypes and what kind of players do get generated. And I have seen it in my limited experience in franchise mode. The draft class ratings as a whole definitely feel a little bit different. I don't want to make it sound like I'm seeing this as overpowered, but I'm definitely seeing more 80+ rated players than I did in Madden 25 from a generated default franchise draft class on average, which leads me to believe that, you can't just necessarily assume that these draft class sliders from Madden 25 could just carry over to Madden 26, because I can say right now for particular, I am seeing a lot of 80+ rated guards, and I'm not seeing as many overpowered corners. That was an issue last year. I would almost always have corners set to weak in my draft class, because if not, you'd have freaking 8 to 10 corners every single year that were like a 75+. But from what I can tell right now, at least at launch, go with default here. Now here's a big one. All Madden sliders. I said this, the exact same thing in my college football 26 video, where I've had the game for almost a week. There's not really much you can do in that time frame to come up with here we go everybody, the official top, best, greatest of all time, emoji, Madden 26 gameplay. So there's just not been enough time. But from what I have played in the areas that I'm thinking like, okay, let's fine tune it to my personal play style, and this is what I will be using. You can try these out with yourselves. I would always stress, go default, and then come to this if you're kind of thinking things could be adjusted to be either harder or a little bit easier on the user. But I have QB accuracy at 45, pass blocking at 55, default for wide receiver catching. I'm going to buff my run blocking by 60. Tell you right now, short yardage in my experience has been very difficult trying to run the football. I got ball security at 50 default, pass defense reaction time at default. I got interceptions nerfed a little bit to make it harder for us as a 40, and then default in pass coverage and tackling. So, I mean, overall, I'm making two things a little bit easier in favor of me, the user, and with my quarterback accuracy and interceptions, I'm going to make it a little bit more challenging on all Madden. For the CPU, follows along the same type of trend. I have 40 for quarterback accuracy. I have 45 for their pass blocking default, for wide receiver catching and run blocking, as well as ball security and pass defense reaction time. If I'm taking a hit down to 40 on the picks, I'm turning their interceptions down to 40 as well. We have 50 on pass coverage, 50 on tackling. Special teams is locked in as is. I'm going default for injuries, default for fatigue, and I'm bumping up the speed threshold from 50 up to 55. A change to the slider sets in Madden 26, you're going to have an option to adjust what happens in precipitation. So that is rain and snow games. And I feel like this is something that I've had a little bit more experience with in College Football 26, where these sliders are also available for the first time. And it feels like kind of 50 is a good spot to have them at right now. Now, penalty sliders are always the area that I have no clue. I get lost in the weeds. I know when you eventually start looking around the World Wide Web for slider sets in Madden, you have like Matt 10 sliders and Mr. Hurricane. They adjust the penalty sliders a lot. I have no idea where to start with that, so I just leave them on default for the time being. But the only thing I change in penalties, and I've been doing it the last couple years, I turn off intentional grounding. Now, this could be placebo. This could be one of those things. I'm doing this for early access. A dev could watch it and say, there's no chance that does. In my mind, when I turn off intentional grounding, I swear it makes the opposing team's quarterback a little bit more aggressive. Like, for the better, I want to see them try to make those dangerous throws. Maybe it opens up a riskier throw that could open up for me to get an interception to make a play on the football. But I've always kind of felt turning off intentional grounding makes the opposing team's quarterback play a little bit more aggressive. And I think that, in partner with the new trait system that has been implemented in Madden 26 franchise mode, that makes quarterbacks and gives them certain traits that could have them play a little bit more aggressive and make them play more like their real life selves, is going to be a good combo. So I think that will about do it. That is the settings that I will be using on each and every one of my Madden 26 franchise modes when we load up for the first little bit, at least until the first title update here in Madden 26. So if you guys are looking to start your franchise mode and use similar sliders that I am, that is what I am rocking. So hey, if you did learn something, you're going to be rocking with these sliders, at least at launch, and it is your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. We're getting on our journey now to 200,000 subscribers here on the channel. So each and every one of you guys that is stopping by for the first time, you like it, hey, why not hang out a little bit? Please let me know in the comment section below if there's any other questions you want to know regarding Madden 26 franchise mode. I'll do my best to answer them. And that'll do it for me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, it's your boy C4 saying peace, I love ya. Have a good one.